Hello, Simon.
Helps if I unmute. Hi, Paul. How you doing?
Hi, I'm fine. How are you?
Good, thank you.
All
Hi,
right.
Tom.
Sorry?
Hi, Tom.
Yeah, I'm today I'm not in the car,
That's good.
but rather calling from my home office here.
Nice.
Hi there.
Hey, afternoon, folks.
How's it going, Tom?
Yeah, very good. How are you doing?
Fine, thank you. Don't know, really expecting anyone else. We could hold on for a minute or two just to see.
Being recorded.
Oh, wow.
So hopefully everyone has access to the shared doc. So please drop your name in there if you'd like to. Hey, David.
Hey there, I've been called that. We have several folks.
We do. I don't know what's happened to Ryan. He hasn't been for the last few of these meetings, but
Well, actually, I can answer that one. Shall we just go ahead and start? Because I do want to
sure.
answer that question. So it turns out that Ryan has just recently moved to a new company, and is basically no longer going to be able to lead this working group. So basically, the tag is already in. I see Ava's here also, so Ava, you can say whatever I forgot to say, or correct whatever I say. But I think the TAC discussion right now is, can who should lead instead? Maybe should this group be integrated into other existing working groups instead of being a separate working group? I don't think a decision's been made, but I think that's going to be. But Ryan is not going to be able. Basically, I think his new company is not a member of OpenSSF, and they don't want him to use his time on that. And I mean, that's okay. So
Yep.
that's the situation. I think that's unfortunate, but that's the situation. And Ava, please correct everything I said, please.
No, I think the TAC meeting, we had a pretty healthy discussion about what the relationship between the TAC and working groups and projects, now that projects are coming in with code, should be in the future. And we seemed to all agree that we want to think more intentionally about that and maybe model the relationship here in the OpenSSF on what's been successful in a couple other foundations like the Confidential Computing Consortium or the CNCF. I dropped some links into that meeting notes on what Anne Bertuccio and I built in the Confidential Computing Consortium that's been working well for them for the past 2 years. But ultimately, I think that conversation just now ended at, we're going to have a brand new TAC in what, 2 weeks? So action items for them, no changes today.
Yeah, the voting will have ended in 2 weeks, but I don't think we will have seated everybody. So I think the honest, although we will know more in 2 weeks, I think the new TAC will actually meet in 4 weeks. It is a
And then
more
it'll
likely sequence.
and no doubt take that TAC some time to get their footing, and yeah.
Yeah, so I would suggest that this group talk, at least briefly talk about, doesn't have to be today, what would you like to see, and then, and let the new TAC get a chance to make some decisions. But um, I think that's up in the air. We want. I don't think anybody needs meetings just for the sake of meetings. But but there are real problems to be solved. So we want to get problem solved and as efficiently as we can, knowing that that's, sometimes you have to discuss things through to figure out what, in fact, the right things are.
Yeah, I mean, I completely understand that and have no problem with any of that, obviously. And I think this working group has historically struggled to come to a kind of unified view of what we should be doing. However, last time we did focus more on one thing, thanks to Paul coming on board, because Paul was very interested in the web application definition I came up with originally. And so that's something that I think we're both very keen to push forward, and other people have expressed interest as well. So that's on the agenda. Whether that has to be part of this working group or another working group or an entirely separate project, I don't mind. I don't get involved in these politics things. I just like getting on with work. So
Would love to ask if some of the work that I've been doing on supply chain synthesis is useful or good information or duplicative to what this working group has already done, since I haven't been active in this working group before.
I don't know anything about your work, I'm afraid. So if you give us a quick summary, that would be very useful.
Dropped a link on Zoom. The TLDR is I started a Google Doc last summer to try and do an overview of the entire supply chain landscape in open source, which included collecting or building a list and categorizations of lots and lots of different projects in this space, tools available in this space, and proposing a lexical categorization of those tools into roughly five distinct functions. There's a couple tools that cross into or fulfill multiple purposes. And the long goal there was try and help reduce the communication friction between a lot of these tools and projects where they're using similar words to mean things that are importantly, but only subtly different.
Cool. Okay, that sounds very useful, but I don't think it's so related to what we're looking at. So the web application definition originally came about because we had a variety of people, or people with a variety of backgrounds on this working group. And we got discussing the differences between static source code analysis, dynamic analysis, and fuzzing. And static analysis tends to have an easier way of getting started, because if you point at the source code, it knows where the source code is. Dynamic analysis and fuzzing has a harder time because you point it at a repo, we go, what? We can't get from a repo to a running service. And that's really what the idea of the web application definition is. The idea is there will be a relatively simple file which would tell an automated tool how it can get an instance of the service or services associated with a repo up and running, and then it can start. Then those tools can start doing their stuff with it.
Okay, so checking my understanding of this, the focus of this working group has gone from broadly look at all open source security tooling to here's one category of tools that you've all thought you can make an impact with.
Well, I think the working group has gone through quite a few discussions, some of them very interesting, but they didn't really come down to, nothing really came of them, apart from a lot of, a lot of things were learnt by a lot of people, including myself. But originally the people in the working group came from different areas, and we talked about our experiences and the tooling and the problems we came across, and we came to the conclusion that a lot of things were kind of different. Security tools work in different ways because they do very different things. There are definitely areas of overlap and areas where they could collaborate much more usefully, but we hadn't kind of got down to that particular. We hadn't got down to a large number of things that we could work on. This was something that I kind of came up with, liked the idea of, but didn't have enough time to push forward. But then Paul got in touch with me recently and said he was interested, in which case, great, somebody can push it forward. So it's something I would like to use, but I haven't had time to kind of make it into something real.
Is there a draft that we can point to? I don't have a URL.
Yes, yeah. It is in the repo.
Maybe Simon, while you're searching, just let me quickly chip in here. So
please.
Today is actually my second meeting, so I'm not very familiar with kind of the history of this working group and what phases you went through. But maybe connecting to what David said in the beginning, personally, from the practitioner's perspective and from the industrial perspective, I'm very much interested in having a working group on security tooling specifically. Because I mean, you can have all those nice methods and metrics and whatnot, but in the end of the day, the question is, how do you transform this into something that you can apply to your software projects or whatever? So this is actually how I came to join this group specifically, because the topic or the topics around security tooling is what we need. And I wouldn't say that we are limited to any specific type of tools. I assume this is just something that we have looked into and now we're kind of following up. But I will definitely read and check the repository that you ever shared to see what kind of taxonomy that is.
Just so you know, earlier on in the history of this working group, there was a brief guide that was developed. I've included a link to it within the notes here. It's part of the working group's results. But I don't think it's wrong as it is. It doesn't go into some details. It's fairly abstract, I should say. It's not so much. It doesn't say use tool X and name a tool or anything like that. It's much more of what are the main kinds of tools and what you might look for. And but I think there was a very big challenge to try to figure out how to go further than that. So we created that brief guide and left it at that.
Yeah, I think initially quite a few people who joined the working group really wanted to have that definitive guide to these are the tools I should be using. And I think quite a few of us in the other people in the group were saying, well, we don't have the kind of capabilities to evaluate tools in that way and make those recommendations, unfortunately.
I would even pose a challenge to doing that. The OpenSSF isn't a great, it isn't appropriate to say for all projects and products out there, here are the few that have been blessed. Right?
Makes sense.
Now the CNCF has been doing in their security technical group they call the Secure Software Factory, with a couple of white papers and recommendations, both broadly on the flow one should follow, what kinds of tools to use at each step along the software lifecycle, with a list of ones that they know about. They're being, I think, quite good at making recommendations that are non-exclusive. So here are the ones that are in our community that we can recommend. And here's how to add your own projects to that list in our next iteration of this paper.
Do you have a link to those recommendations? That would be really useful as well.
I can try to find, yeah, they've got a V2 paper in progress right now. I don't want to link to the draft, but they did publish one last year. I'll see if I can find that.
Thanks.
OpenSSF shouldn't do. I mean, I don't mind saying as much. In principle, I don't mind, and it can be useful to say, given condition X, you should definitely look at least tool Y and Z. But it is a challenge to do, and it's as far as specific, one of the challenges that's very difficult to get data about them. Those of you who have followed some of this may be aware of problems like DeWitt clauses, which make it very, very challenging to find data about specific tools that's publicly available. I can tell you that the U.S. government has some data about tools that I am not allowed to talk about in public because they internally did some evaluations, but publishing almost any of that is illegal under a lot of the not illegal. It's a violation of the service terms. So.
Well, I think people are just asking for recommendations on open source tools, which shouldn't have so many problems. But even so, I kind of agree that recommendations from this kind of working group are probably not desirable or practical.
I think they're desirable.
My point.
Yeah, go ahead.
It's not. There's not a problem with making a list of recommendations, but with picking a single one.
Yep.
Right? No king making.
Yeah.
Let me add that. No king making.
Having worked in a couple of foundations that ended up in a position where there were inappropriate pressures applied to bless one project before another project, you don't want to be in that position.
Yeah. So I think I think there's a number of developers out there who would like to, just tell me what to use. But the challenge is, okay, we want to be helpful to those developers, but it turns out to be much, much harder, which is why the guide ended up being what it is, which is, I think it I think it does have helpful information, but it does not specify specific tools.
Yeah, and the CNCF's work, their initial formulation of this didn't include a list of specific tools, and the ones they've been sort of iteratively generating do include those lists. I can't speak to exactly how, but I think they're taking the approach of let community members provide a sort of a verified configuration. Like, here's the secure software factory paradigm. Now in this configuration, it's a combination of tool X, Y, and Z, and in that configuration, it's a combination of tools A, B, and C.
Yeah, something that just comes to mind is maybe like taking the entire DevSecOps cycle and just like for each phase of the pipeline, naming a few tools that OpenSSF knows that can be beneficial. Again, opening it up for contributions. Like if I have a new tool that I've developed and I think it can fit in this phase, I can suggest it or add it under certain conditions. And then even for like small companies that don't have the resources to buy commercial tools, they can have like something that they can use open source tools to basically build out their entire DevSecOps pipeline. I think that is something that can be really beneficial.
and you know, even if you don't have like a really defined say recommendation or something like that, just having this place, this group, this forum to discuss with other experts what you could use and what approaches you could use to tackle specific problems, right? If someone comes with a specific challenge, is extremely useful. So
not to toot my own horn, but that is a big part of why I started the lexicon work or the landscape work last year, to try and it has not reached my desired goal for it yet, but what you're pointing at is the same thing. Like if a small company or a nonprofit or university shows up and says, hey, we don't have a budget to go buy a commercial solution, but we know we need to do X, generate an SBOM, do fuzzing, signing, whatever it is. What are the open source tools available that we can use to do that thing? They need to get there, they have to start from knowing what are the functions they need, what are the things they need, what are the terms mean, and how do they disambiguate an SBOM from signed artifacts, from just a manifest file. Like someone who doesn't know the space yet, how do they navigate the space to discover what they need to meet some requirement? And then what tools help them do that?
yeah.
Now, it is, although it's a lot of work, it is easier if you are simply saying, I'm going to list all the open source or all the tools in a particular area. There is the challenge of some tools that it's not always clear what bin they fit into, or they fit multiple bins. But you know, when I wrote a paper a couple of years ago, trying to identify categories of tools, I listed examples, but didn't try to do the king making. Just here are examples of tools to show that in fact this category exists, and here's a bunch that fit that category. Here's the definition. Here's how they fit in, and that is totally doable. It's a lot of work to make those lists, though you can build on existing work.
So the link I dropped to my supply chain synthesis, it's actually kind of buried in there. This is what I'm talking about. I already have a list of tools and functions that definitely needs work. It's not done, but maybe this is a starting point. Because it already lists 40 tools.
Yeah, I mean, to really cover the space, you're talking hundreds, but that doesn't make it impossible.
Right, not impossible,
yeah,
but there's a lot of tools here and a lot of work to define a taxonomy and
and I actually did some work a number of years ago for something called the software SOAR, which, I mean, we identified 50 categories of tools and a number of tools within each category. So there's a little bit of a cheat, but in a couple of cases, it's sort of the same tool, but used radically different ways. But still, there are a lot of different tools, and that's okay.
Talking of which, I've just dropped a link into open source web scanners. I've just remembered it's something I created recently. I've been maintaining it for some time, but I've actually made it public recently. So just thought I'd throw that in there as something else.
I have an older list of all open source static analysis tools. I haven't maintained it for a little while, but I mean, that could be, if somebody wants to pick it up and grab and move on, that would be awesome with my blessing.
I think that the meta question, sorry, David.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
I think that the meta question I'd love to pose to this group is picking up this kind of work what this working group would want to own? This list of open source web scanners and David's list of static analysis tools. Is this the right working group to own that?
This has been suggested before, of maintaining a list of all of the tools in the area. OWASP maintains a list of DAST and SAST and various other tools as well. So there are other organizations doing these things. I think really one of the key things is who actually wants to do some work, because I think there's a lot of people who are very happy turning up and chatting about things, and I include myself in that list as well. So I'm not here to grab loads of extra work, so I'm as guilty of that as anyone. But I think there's been some grand ideas before, but if people don't want to pick up and actually do stuff, then it doesn't get done. So, you know, there's loads of things this group could really usefully do, but someone needs to drive them.
So the question from my side would be, you know, if you kind of come from this like industrial background, I actually am rather driven by specific problems, and then I'm very interested into looking in any potential approaches to tackle these problems, be it existing tools or be it, for example, ideas like what Simon initially started with, this web application definition, which I think can be also used to, I don't know, enable, say, easier fuzzing of some embedded software or something like that. So I don't know, I'm not entirely aware of your background. So yeah, can you somehow, what's your take on that?
Sorry, that's directed at.
So sorry?
Was that directed at an individual or?
Well, everyone basically. Like what about this like problem-driven approach, basically?
Well, I must admit, I do go for the problem-driven approach. You know, there's certain things I want to solve, and I like focusing on those. So I'm all for that kind of approach. It depends. I don't know what other people think.
Definitely helps make a more defined scope. At least more trivial to define a scope that way.
Simon, can you recapture that or type it in or something? Because I'm not.
I mean, I think we're kind of, I mean, I know I've been, you know, looking at particular things. I'm not sure anyone's really been looking at what this group should be doing for a little while. And it's kind of, as I said, I think it's very much a question of who's here and what we want to do. So, I mean, maybe now's another good time to just do a quick roundtable and say why we're here, because I think you know, some people have only just turned up. Some of us have been here for a while, but you know, the group has definitely changed over time. It'd be very interesting to know what people actually want to get out of it.
Sure. So who wants to start? Should I?
Go for it. Oh,
Go for it.
All right. So my main motivation is to look into what's available in terms of open source tools for specific security tasks. Because well, basically what I do security research in industrial setting. And you know, along of this security engineering process that we have, you have many different things you have to do. And obviously, if you want to automate as much as possible of these tasks, then you need tools. And this is what mainly motivates me to join this discussion.
I'll just jump in. I mean, my overall goal is I want open source software to be secure and people be able to determine that secure. And I'm talking all the way from writing the code through to production deployment. Um, there's no way that we're going to have deep manual analysis of every line of everything. It's going to need to be supported by tools. So I think tools are part of that larger goal. But I'm actually rather ambivalent about how exactly to organize working groups, or I want things to be effective, but exactly what gets worked on first, is less important than making progress. I would prefer, of course, making progress on things that actually matter. I do take Simon's point, though, that if you say, hey, we want to do X, but no one will do X, well, nothing's happening then. So something needs to change then. Tell you what, why don't we have everybody point to somebody else, or it takes a long time for us to stare at people to figure out who's next. So I'm going to pick on Ava.
Hey, I'm fine with that. I've dropped into this and a couple other working groups infrequently, but in looking at the GitHub, there's been very little activity. So I think agreeing with Simon's point, working groups are great when work is being done. I would love to see this body start having regular attendance from the same people who are actually signing up to do the work that is valuable to the group, with then a check-in to the TAC or to other folks saying, hey, here's what we're doing, here's why we think it's important. We'd love some feedback. And the most important thing that I can think of, just my opinion, don't know what else other folks think is important, is creating that sort of list of recommended security tools. A lexicon or taxonomy, different types of tools, things that they, needs they fill, and some recommendations or citations out to other references like the ones we've been sharing. David's and Simon both have one, I've got one, but help make more people aware of what tools are out there, how to pick the right tool for their needs. I think that's a useful purpose for this working group. And if people are going to do that, great. If not, then we don't need to all have meetings to talk about what we're not going to do.
Well, I'll chip in now. So I got pulled into this working group because there were people who understood about SAST and fuzzing, but not DAST. And so I'm part of OWASP, the project leader of the OWASP attack proxy, which is DAST tool and the most popular DAST tool in the world. Yay. So that's our claim anyway. No one's managed to disagree with that. So I'm here to, I certainly don't think that DAST is the be all and end all. I know that there's no silver bullets. There's lots of things you need to worry about. I'm vaguely interested in all of them, but I'm definitely here to make sure that DAST doesn't get misrepresented and to make sure I get my oar in about ZAP.
I can go. I only kind of recently started to attend OpenSSF working groups full stop. So I was trying to understand which are kind of going to be valuable and which we can kind of as a company contribute back to. Kind of came to this one more to understand, again, I guess what its purpose was, because by the minutes I did find it difficult to see kind of what its open focus was. I think from what I'd like to be able to get out of it, sure, knowing some kind of defined list of tools would be helpful, but if we can't be that specific, at least some kind of best practices or things we should look for when evaluating tools and making decisions on which tools are going to help service. Because I think I can be open about the fact that we've been quite reactive to things that are happening in a landscape, but that doesn't mean that we're selecting tools that will help us in the long run. And having some kind of additional context and wisdom is definitely going to be valuable for us.
So I'll go. So I actually I lead vulnerability research for a startup cybersecurity company located in Israel, based in Israel. And also I recently started to join several OpenSSF working groups, trying to see, understand the landscape, see where we can contribute. As a company, there are several directions that are interesting for us as a company that we deal with on a daily basis. So we thought if we can contribute some of that knowledge back to the community, that'd be great. So mainly around SBOM, with specifically dynamic validation of components, like if something is actually loaded, which is a perspective that we don't see a lot of. Mainly it's focused on either source code or like the static analysis. And yeah, so that's basically it. And I'm open to suggestion regarding what to work on. I relate to the idea of kind of creating like a knowledge base which is vetted by OpenSSF for different security tools in various stages of the pipeline. Sort of said something I think can be valuable, but as I said, open to anything that will be decided by the group.
Just as a quick note, if we wanted to do that, I mean, there is that little guide that this group's already developed that might be expanded if that's where this group wants to go.
I mean, it does
Next?
seem to be. Sorry, go on.
I said, who's
Sorry,
next?
yeah, I can quickly go next. So I work for the, I currently lead the OSSF scorecards working group. And so just as a brief background, scorecard is not itself a security tooling, but it also acts as like a meta security tool, which checks for other tools, like let's say some SAST availability or like CIFRs and things like that. So my hope to come to this working group is to kind of get an understanding of what kind of things we can be adding to scorecards, what kind of things should we be checking for, and what kind of tools should OpenSSF be promoting to help open source users, encourage usage of these tools in open source world. So yeah.
And if I may, one of the challenges that the scorecards folks have, which Azim is painfully aware of, is some of the things that scorecards wants to measure are really hard to measure. For example, scorecards wants to identify, are there SAS tools, are there DAS tools, and it's very, very hard to determine that in an automated way. The badging project, we didn't even, I mean, I guess we try a little bit, but not very hard because it's really hard to do that in an automated way. If there could be guidelines and ways to suggest that people do things in certain ways to make it easier to detect them, I'm sure the scorecard folks will be grateful.
I think I've raised an issue on that about putting DAS tooling in, and I know why you haven't done it. And that's actually one of the reasons why the web application definition, that's a nice side effect. If we can get that working and adopted, then that'll be a very simple way for the scorecard and other projects to detect DAS tooling in operation.
Could you point me to this issue or the doc that you're mentioning?
If you scroll up to the top of our doc, there's a link to the web application definition. The issue I raised on scorecard, I'll have to look. So, That's the issue arrays just put in the doc there.
Yeah, I can look into it. Do you mind? I don't know how much time we have in the working group. I don't want to take up everyone's time. Do you want to maybe just walk me through what exactly would this add, or what it would involve? Or if you want, we can even take it offline on Slack or something.
Well, I mean, I think now might be a good time for Paul to have a chat about, say, what he's been up to recently.
Sure. All right. So basically, what we discussed last time, sorry, was how to kind of develop this idea forward, and we decided to try to develop this kind of for the juice shop web application, and see how we could apply this web application definition there. And basically, I only did like a, let's say, an initial preparation step by writing 2 GitHub actions to start the juice shop web app in the on the host of basically of GitHub Actions, and then one with the Docker container, just to check what we would need to do, and then perform the simple curl. And what I would like to discuss today is basically how to proceed in this direction. So shall we write a, like, I don't know, a very simple basic script of kind of parsing the web app definition, and then passing this data to some sort of a command or something like that?
So I think that's great that you got to that stage. Really good. I mean, the way I always thought would be we would to create something like a GitHub action, which basically just you would add it to a repo. When it runs, it would see if this definition was present. If it wasn't present, it would probably exit with an error. If it was present, then it would try to start the repo or start the service in Docker. Once it's up, try and access an endpoint. And if that was successful, then the action would succeed. Anything else would fail. So that's kind of a kind of sanity check that the web definition is there and it appears to do the right thing. I think that would be a, particularly with that being open source, that would be a really useful proof of concept, really.
Okay. Yeah. Sounds doable. Let me just take some.
And then is that enough for us to make more of this to try and publicize it, or do people think we actually need some tools that make use of this, or what's the is there any views on that? Apparently not.
Hello?
Yeah. Yep. Heard that. Hello.
Azim, I think that was a question to you.
Well, anyone?
I see. So, could you repeat the question? Maybe I missed it.
I'm sorry. I was so it wasn't specifically at you, as to generally to the group. If we have a web application definition that we have a definition for, and we have an example GitHub action, which will, if you run it on a repo, will start the service and check it's actually running. So that's a proof of concept. The web application exists and it seems to do something. is that enough for us to start publicizing it, or do we need it to be actually used by some tools, or where do we go from there?
So I don't know if this makes sense, but I could make a suggestion here. So Scorecard already has this whole GitHub Actions thing, which basically if it's installed, it can do a bunch of checks, and if those checks, depending on how we think they have performed, if they have performed poorly, we can show up an alert. So considering that you have this issue here, I don't know if it makes sense for you or Paul. Like if you guys have cycles, you could actually consider adding such a check to Scorecard directly, because this is pretty much what Scorecard does. We already have parsing libraries to figure out YAML files, GitHub workflows, and things like that. And the idea is, if you find a certain file, then you can assert a bunch of things on it, and if those assertions fail, then we show those code scanning alerts on the GitHub UI. So all of that framework already exists. I wonder if as a proof of concept, maybe I wonder if you guys just want to try out starting from Scorecard, and maybe then adding more complex features on that.
So one thing I can help with is, so we have 3 GitHub Actions for Zap. In all cases, you have to say where the target application is. One thing we could do is we could actually change those actions to make the target URLs optional. And if this definition exists, to actually try and start the application and then use that. So that would be something where would be a real tool that does useful stuff, would actually make use of the definition. I think then we've got that, being able to use it within Zap, actually having it within the scorecard, so you then start scoring, and we've got an example action which doesn't do anything, just shows you how to get to that stage. I think that would be quite a good starting point.
Yeah, sounds good. I think I'd be happy to have this discussion even with the other scorecard maintainers. So if you want, we could continue the discussion on the issue that you pointed, or feel free to create a new issue and we can discuss that. Also, we have scorecard bi-weeklies that we run, so we can even have this discussion there if you would like to join there and discuss in GVC.
Azim, can we reach you via Slack?
Yeah, I'm available on Slack, so you can ping me there. We also have a scorecards Slack channel, so they'll also have the other scorecard maintainers who can also chime in.
Is anyone interested in action? So to jump back away from the web application definition, is anyone interested in trying to define, or well, to actually move on the guide to security tools to flesh that out into a bit more detail, the different types of security tools available?
I actually wrote a significant part, so I would be willing to flesh out more, but not just by myself. I mean, uh, so some help needed. And frankly, I think the obvious question will be exactly what is important and useful, because it's really easy to write long documents that then get ignored, and that doesn't do anybody any good.
I think one of the things that was mentioned before is helping people understand what categories of tools there are and when they would apply them. So, if we have
the guide does list specific categories already, and defines them, which is maybe not exactly when do I apply, but hopefully it helps in that area.
So I would be interested definitely to look into the guide. I don't know how much I can contribute, but yeah, would definitely be interested.
Okay, I think we've got in the notes. Yeah, I just put in the notes the link there. So, I mean, it's sit down read, but it's not very long. So,
I'll also take a look.
Okay.
It's the static analysis tools, or is it a different link?
No, hold up. This link right here.
Ah,
Guide.md.
yeah, okay, got it.
Come to think of it, I don't know if that's linked to from the main. If not, that's probably something we should fix. I tried. Well, I technically it's on there, so technically it's nope. That's the only place it's not actually linked to.
And is there any interest of anyone to take on the lead of this working group? I have led it before and obviously didn't do a great job, so I'd love someone else to do it.
No, I suppose you need someone with at least some experience doing these things. So why would you not volunteer to at least continue for the next, I don't know, couple of months or something like that?
I've kind of been vaguely leading it for the last few weeks last few times because Ryan hasn't been able to attend. Happy to do that, but I'm also very happy for anyone else to take it on. I mean, I don't think I've led any working groups before this, so I don't think you need that much experience. I'm happy to be the default person who will just get discussions moving, but if someone would actually like to lead it, then I'm very happy to hand over the reins.
All right, I'm going to add a link to the guide. Yeah, I don't because I work because of my role. I think I'm not supposed to be a lead of a working group also, but I'm happy to help whoever is the lead.
I don't know if this came up in the meet before, but did we consider merging this working group with something else? Like,
Yes. Yeah, that's definitely on the table. There's some other. I think one challenge is that tools by themselves are actually in support of other things. So, it's perfectly plausible to have, say, the supply chain working group working on tools related to supply chain, and the if the goal is what are your best practices for applying tools, that could be easily moved into the best practices working group. So, it's quite plausible. Maybe part of the challenge here is that tools really don't exist in isolation. They exist in support of larger goals. And so maybe a reorg to support various goals might be a better way to do it. And that's fine. I don't really care how things get organized as long as we try to make progress on making things better.
Just as a spontaneous comment, but maybe I don't understand the current group structure. So I think you're right. Tools don't exist in isolation. Of course, on the other hand, if you kind of have a very, or say an application area or something like that, then anything that is beyond this specific, I don't know, type of problem or something that you do, it kind of gets lost. And so from my point of view, when you're talking about security tooling in general, you kind of you have a broad range of problems that you can cover. If you look into the notes for today under web app definition POC, is this something? Are these the right steps to move this forward?
Which this I'm sorry, I don't understand your.
I can probably comment that. I would say that is definitely the right direction, but I don't know if those can be considered action items as such. So yeah, I think the next step there would be to like let's start a discussion on the scorecard channel, either Slack or the GitHub issue, and figure out what might be a concrete action item we can take there, in terms of like figuring out this like where's the overlap in web app definition and scorecard checks, and I guess we can go from there.
Okay, that's a good one, and then we can define the specific next steps. All right. Well, that perfectly answers my question. Thanks.
Is there any more business anyone wants to discuss as we're getting close to the deadline?
Yeah, I will I will add a link to the guide, and at least make the current guide less of a mysterious I can't find it item.
David, I wonder this discussion of whether to continue with the working group or should we merge it. Like, is this something that should be brought up in the TAC meet?
It has already been, that has already happened. The TAC meeting happened earlier today, and that was specifically one of the agenda items. The decision made by the TAC at the time was that this is actually the TAC is about to be. We're currently, in fact, everybody who's already participating, please vote. There's a new TAC being voted for, and so I think the feeling was it wasn't reasonable to do a big change like that when there's a new TAC coming in that might make different decisions. So I think what's going to happen is the next TAC meeting is basically going to be the last meeting of the current members. We'll onboard the new TAC members. And so 4 weeks from now, there'll be an actual new TAC which can make those decisions. By that point, the intent is to basically the old TAC, here's what we propose, and then let the new TAC make decision. If we don't have somebody who says, hey, I want to be a lead, that may actually answer the question. So because there's no point.
Yeah. So yeah, I was just saying, like, I mean, I think the lead question kind of ties back to the point of what exactly is the working group trying to accomplish.
Right.
I guess if there's clarity there, it should be possible for somebody to step up.
Yeah, but it's actually kind of the reverse. I mean, in the end, the working group needs to disagree on what they're trying to accomplish, but a lead's job is to help work that out, not dictate to everybody else, here's what we're going to do. But it's also nobody has any ideas. Let's just stare at each other for an hour. That we don't need. I mean, there is always going to be a little soul searching in most situations, unless somebody comes in with a very clear idea. But if it's just, is this a right? It could be, although really, I think if you're going to develop an open source security tool, you better have, Simon and I can both say that that's not something that, hey, let's spend half an hour and write the tool. That's a significant endeavor. That doesn't make it wrong. I encourage it. But I think that comes down to a lead should help define and work with and get us going towards specific directions. And for example, Simon's specific ideas, the great advantage of his specific idea is that we have an idea when we accomplished it. All for that. So, all right, I see we're at the top of the hour, and I'm hoping that I added our guide, because that is, I may have done it correctly. We'll see. Okay, so there is a link there's a link
Yay.
to our guide. So at least one thing was accomplished here. We did something, now people can find it. Always a plus.
Awesome.
All right.
Cool.
Yeah, I've got to have now. I think it's a good time to close the meeting.
Yeah.
Thank you all very much. I thought it was very useful.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks, Aaron. Thanks all.
Take care. Bye-bye.